How's it going, Giants fans? My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo, and today we want to discuss Kenny Golladay. He's getting some hate and some negative attention on social media, so we figured, well, you know what? Why not break into exactly what his money looks like, if trading him this year, next year, what that would actually cost the Giants, because it's not going to be easy to just move on from him, and why we were also excited to sign him in the first place. What can he offer this team, and essentially what has he been struggling with lately? There's been a lot of videos showing maybe a little bit of a lazy approach. He did say yesterday on Tuesday that there's no harder critic than himself. He's harder on himself than any of us would be, which is something you'd like to hear from a guy that's getting paid $72 million. But I will say, he hasn't really lived up to the expectations, hasn't lived up to the price tag just yet. But again, anyone in a Jason Garrett-led offense is probably going to underwhelm. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. He still is young. He is still in his prime. We've seen what he can do. He was a Pro Bowler a couple of years ago with the Detroit Lions, but we are seeing how essential Matt Stafford was to that and how great of a quarterback he really is. And, he's made a lot of guys better with the Rams too. So Stafford definitely needs a better quarterback situation. Maybe Daniel Jones can elevate his game this year. We're going to kind of discuss his strengths, weaknesses, and, what it would look like to even try and trade him for those that are keen on moving on after this season. But Anthony, before we dive into the good stuff, how are you today, my friend?
I'm doing all right. And Kenny Golladay is a player that I really wanted the Giants to sign last offseason when they did. I was a huge fan of his over in Detroit. I thought this was the perfect opportunity for the Giants to finally find that alpha dog, number one wide receiver for their team. And I think they found it. I just think they found it at the wrong time. Wrong place, wrong time kind of deal with Kenny Golladay. They paid him a whole lot of money. And honestly, you take a look at the contract now, compare it to some of these other wide receiver contracts. It's not that bad. The wage that Kenny Golladay is earning is bad because he's not playing anywhere near that wage. But if you had the 2019 version of Kenny Golladay that played for the Detroit Lions playing on that salary in today's league, that's a good deal. So if the Giants are able to get Kenny Golladay to return to form, I don't hate the contract anymore. But right now, the way that he's playing, he doesn't deserve the money, and he needs to play better. Just point blank, Kenny Golladay needs to be better. And you take a look at the season that he had last year. I understand he was hampered with injuries. Jason Garrett hampered everybody with the offense. But you're taking a look now with Mike Kafka, Brian Dable in town running the offense. If there's not a huge breakout season from Kenny Golladay with these two new coaches, then it's just Kenny Galladay's fault at this point, right? You got to give him all the blame. But I'm really hoping that he can turn it around. We know how much of a beast he was over in Detroit. He was a two-time 1,000-yard receiver. He was a Pro Bowler. He led the NFL in receiving touchdowns. Kenny Golladay at one time was one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and the Giants just need to hope that he's able to return to form.
Yeah, I mean, look, returning to form for a receiver of his caliber, it shouldn't be that difficult, right? We know what he's good at. We know what he's bad at. He's not a burner. He's not a fast receiver. He's not a guy that you're expecting to go and absolutely take the top off a defense and push the ball downfield in terms of speed, but he has a big frame at 6'4". He's a physical possession receiver. That is what he's good at. And Matthew Stafford was a really good quarterback for him because he tossed a really nice ball, and he would put the ball in the perfect spot for Kenny Golladay to go up and make a play. He's a 50-50 jump ball possession guy. He does not create a lot of separation. He uses his massive wingspan and length to create that separation for him. If you throw that ball 2 yards in front of him, he'll get to it. That's 2 yards of reception just based on his length alone. The question is, can Daniel Jones put the football where it needs to be so he can maximize what he's actually good at? I think that this is more of a quarterback and scheme thing than it is a Kenny Golladay thing in terms of just him struggling in this system. I think Matthew Stafford probably made him look a lot better because Matt Stafford is just a great quarterback, and ultimately great quarterbacks make everybody look better. So the Giants maybe overvalued him in that sense, but I do think he can be a very valuable piece of this offense moving forward. Now, the thing is, I don't necessarily think that Brian Dable and Mike Kafka's offense really predicates its success on a big possession receiver like this. You look at Gabe Davis with the Bills, right? He's probably their biggest receiver between both teams, honestly. And he's the second option, maybe last year, probably the third option behind Cole Beasley and Stephon Diggs. So you look at Kenny Golladay and Brian Dable or Mike Kafka offense, he's probably not their preferred choice. They like smaller, quicker guys, Wan'Dale's, Kadarius Toney's, look like Tyreek Hill, Mecole Hardman. Like I said, Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley, a lot just better route runners and fast. Then you got Isaiah McKenzie. who's kind of like a Wandale Robinson situation there in terms of he can do some stuff in the running game, quick, fast, screen passes, do a lot of stuff there. I think Wandale's better than him long term, but Kenny Golladay doesn't really fit the mold that they necessarily would have. You look at Jason Garrett's offense, he loves a big possession receiver. That was the Des Bryant comparison. He loves physical guys who you can throw the ball up and they'll make plays downfield. That's what Kenny Golladay is really good at. He's not really a scheme fit moving forward, which is why I think that they're probably trying to move on from him at a certain point. But to give you some context into his contract, the Giants currently have $5.4 million. So they don't have any money. But if they were to somehow, they're like, let's cut him now, they would lose $14.4 million because he's counting $35.6 million in dead money this year. Can't release him now. Can't cut him now. You could trade him, but who the hell wants his contract? I don't exactly know. So fast forward to 2023, if you want to cut Kenny Golladay, you can save a little bit of money, but you're still not getting a lot of value, right? So he's going to count $21.4 million against the cap with a $14.7 million dead money cap hit. You're only saving $6.7 million, from cutting him in 2023. So you save $6.7 million, but you still have about a $15 million dead money hit. So you're still like, thank you, Dave Gettleman kind of strapped us with this contract, but we all wanted it at the time. So, I'm not going to say it was a bad thing for us when we wanted Daniel Jones to prove himself. He needed that wide receiver one. We hoped the offensive line would be better. Obviously they weren't, but then you look at 2024, that money goes down a lot. They can save about $15 million from cutting him in 2024. So we're kind of strapped with Kenny Golladay for the next 2 years, unless they can find a trade partner. Now that kind of bites the narrative that let's cut him, let's trade him, let's do this. Can't really do that for 2 years, Anthony. But in the meantime, what's the harm in having him around? He's a good player. He can do a lot of things for your offense. He at least demands attention. And if you're going to 1v1 him downfield, he's going to win those battles most of the time. Now, if you do have a rookie quarterback that comes in after Daniel Jones, and if that's what happens, you have yourself a good group of playmakers to work with. And, having him there is not a bad thing. It's a positive. It's not a negative. So, when you're looking at his contract, how much you'd save if they wanted to cut him next year. So only about $6.7 million, and they're taking on a $14.7 million dead money hit. What do you think they do with him? How do you think they kind of go about utilizing Kenny moving forward?
I think it's really dependent on how he plays this upcoming 2022 season, because you're saying you don't think he'll be a scheme fit. He might not be the type of player that Kafka and Dable are looking for in this offense. Well, what if he goes out there and puts up 12 touchdowns? Then we're going to say, okay, maybe he was a scheme fit. Maybe he was perfect for Brian Dable and Mike Kafka. And then we're going to say, okay, now taking a look at this contract after he just scored double-digit touchdowns, this is a good deal. It's really about how well he performs this season. We'll put it all into perspective, because if you go ahead and you look at NFL salary rankings on SpotRack and you take a look at the wide receiver position, 2022 wide receiver average rankings in terms of average salary per year. Number one is, of course, Tyreek Hill at $30 million. Devontae Adams is up there too. DeAndre Hopkins, Cooper Kupp, A.J. Brown, all those guys are making at least $25 million per year. Number 18 is Kenny Golladay at $18 million per year. Now, if I recall correctly, wasn't he number one when the Giants signed him last year? Has there been that many wide receiver deals that boomed this market up? I believe so. You've got guys like Mike Williams making $20 million this on average every year, compared to 18 for Kenny Golladay. Kenny Galladay's $18 million is tied with Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk makes $18 million per year. So you really take a look at this contract, put it into perspective. Brandon Cooks at $19.5 million. It's not a bad deal. It really isn't a bad deal for Kenny Golladay if he's able to return to form. In fact, if he does return to form and he is a 10-plus touchdown wide receiver this year, it's a great deal for the Giants. It's just about getting him back to playing like his old self. If he's able to do that, stay healthy, play up to par with where he was over in Detroit, well, then this is a good deal that we have in Kenny Galladay's contract. But right now, yes, taking a look at it, the way that this contract was formatted and the way that things are moved around with it, the only out is in 2024, where you can save a lot of money, and that is a bit of a ways down the road. You're not really going to be able to move on from him next year comfortably, at least for the New York Giants. They could do it, maybe in a trade. Post-June trade would give them a saving of $18 million. That could be pretty useful for the Giants next year, but when you're looking at 2024 as a potential out, that's kind of a ways down the road. So really the focus is just to scheme together plays for Kenny Golladay and get him playing back to his old self. Because once again, like I said, I was a huge fan of Galladay's during his time in Detroit. I remember I picked him up really late in my fantasy draft, maybe even on the waiver wire that year, and he ended up leading the NFL in receiving touchdowns. There's something special in Kenny Golladay. It's just been a while since he's been playing at that form. Injuries have been a problem. Coaching has been a problem. Quarterback play has been a problem. But if Daniel Jones is able to have a good year, Kenny Golladay is going to have a good year. My question is, though, for Kenny Golladay, and I'm curious to know what you think, Alex, are you banking on him having a good year if Daniel Jones doesn't perform, right? Isn't that kind of the X factor here for Kenny Golladay? We want Golladay to return to form, but the real question mark here might be Daniel Jones rather than Kenny Golladay. I will say, though, the effort problems are a bit concerning. It is the preseason. It is training camp. Hopefully, once the regular season rolls around, Kenny Golladay returns and is like actually playing like he cares, because in that preseason game, he didn't look like he cared too much. But Alex, again, I'm curious to know what you think. Is Kenny Golladay, is there any way where he can have a solid season while Daniel Jones continues to kind of stink?
That's a good question. I think that, yeah, look, like I said before, Kenny Golladay is as good as the quarterback's going to be, right? Matthew Stafford was a tremendous quarterback. He made Kenny Golladay look like a Pro Bowl player. And, looking back at his stats, the guy had over 1,100, 1,190 yards and 11 touchdowns with a 56% catch rate, 18.3 yards per reception back in 2019, right? He's only 29 years old now. He's not an old guy. He scored 0 touchdowns. Our left freaking tackle had more touchdowns than this man last year. But that wasn't because of Kenny Golladay. That was because of the scheme. That was because of Daniel Jones. That was because of the offensive line. That was because of the red zone efficiency and play calling. There was so many factors. I don't blame Kenny Golladay at all for a lot of these issues that are facing him. The injuries, definitely a little bit of a concern with the hamstring last year, but he's seemingly healthy right now. This is definitely, it all falls on the scheme and it all falls on Daniel Jones' soldiers. And then the thing is, it's like a multi-layered thing. There's like a trickle-down effect when it comes to the offense. Because everything really boils down to the offensive line, no matter what, right? The running game is only as good as the offensive line is. Daniel Jones is only good as the offensive line is. Kenny Golladay is only good as Daniel Jones is, which is only good as the offensive line is. So it's like, if the offensive line sucks, Kenny Golladay will suck. It's directly correlated to everything. And that's kind of the problem, is that Daniel Jones isn't good enough to survive and play well when the offensive line is not good. That's the major issue here. Is that some people bring up a good argument on social media, I've heard a couple times, that some players can work around having a bad offensive line. You look at Aaron Rodgers. He manages to make things happen despite having a bad offensive line sometimes. Lost his left tackle, Bakhtiari, for most of the 2021 season, still had an MVP caliber year. Russell Wilson, one of the worst offensive lines in football year over year, still has Pro Bowl level seasons every season. There are guys that can work around it. Even Derek Carr, he didn't have the best offensive line either, and he had a great season in 2021. So, you look at Daniel Jones and you're saying, okay, well, he's not performing well behind a bad offensive line. Well, in theory or logically, he's not good enough to compensate for a bad offensive line. He needs to have some better factors. He needs to have a better OL. That's the reality of his situation. If the OL sucks, Daniel Jones is probably going to suck. And that's just that's the reality that we all have to face. If you disagree with me, I'd love to hear your perspective, because I don't even know how you argue against that, because we've seen 3 consecutive years of terrible offensive line play and bad Daniel Jones play at the same time. So what else is there to really base it off of? Now, if the Giants do have a good offensive line, I think that Daniel Jones could be a good quarterback. We saw what he did against the Saints last year when he had a good offensive line play. That was the best offensive line played probably in 5 or 6 years. Best game I've seen them play in years. And he looked stout. He looked fantastic. And I was like, wait a second, this guy actually can play. We just need to give him a good offensive line. Problem is, easier said than done. Building a good offensive line is really difficult in the NFL. Now you have a rookie at right tackle. You have a fresh guy at right guard. And you have 2 guys, center, John Feliciano, and at left guard with, I guess, Shane Lemieux, Ben Bredesen, Max Garcia, Josh Azudu mixture that we don't really know what to expect from them. I would go as far as to say I don't really trust this offensive line right now until proven otherwise. Am I optimistic? Of course I am. I'm a Giants fan. I'm very optimistic, but I don't trust them. And with that being said, I don't trust Daniel Jones because I know he's not a good quarterback when the offensive line plays poorly. So going back to Kenny Golladay, if that is the same case again, Kenny Golladay is going to have another bad year. And that's just the reality of the situation. I don't know if that answers your question, but what are your thoughts on that and kind of it all falling back to the offensive line?
I mean, really, you're just saying it's a team sport, and that's absolutely true. You can't have good quarterback play without good offensive line play. You can't have good wide receiver play without good quarterback play. You can't have good play by anybody without good coaching. So it is a team sport at the end of the day. That's the name of the game. That is what football is. team sport. And so we can talk about, man, this guy can be this good if this happens and that happens. Everything needs to go well, in football. If one thing goes wrong, it's a domino effect, and it'll just totally ruin your whole game plan. Your players will play worse. Some players will be, put into positions that they're not comfortable in and they don't succeed in. Again, it is just a team sport. Taking a look at the offensive line, though, for the New York Giants, I do expect massive improvements. From the coaching as well, I expect massive improvements. But is Daniel Jones going to have a massive improvement because of those things? I freaking hope so. But at the end of the day, Daniel Jones might just be a bad quarterback. He might be. And I hope he's not. I hope he's a good quarterback and he has a phenomenal year with the Giants. But at the very least, thank goodness Joe Shane went out there and got the Giants a decent backup in Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor will at least be a serviceable quarterback if Daniel Jones is put to the bench. And I do think that Tyrod Taylor could get some decent production out of Kenny Golladay if he were to step into the lineup, which seems to be an increasing possibility almost every single day of Giants training camp. So again, taking a look at Kenny Golladay, his struggles throughout his first year with the Giants, a lot of them were scheme related, a lot of them were Daniel Jones related, and a lot of them were his own self, whether that be injuries or lack of effort, whatever it was. But for him going into this upcoming season, the number one thing that Giants fans need to see out of Kenny Golladay is effort. That's the number one thing, because taking a look at the way that he's been playing, the way he played in that first preseason game, he had a drop in the red zone that he totally should have caught. He had another play where it seemed like he pulled up on a route that he should have kept running. We've seen some plays like that during practice as well. The effort maybe isn't there right now with Kenny Golladay, and that's the most concerning thing. He seems healthy. He seems like the Giants are ready to go with him. They've got a scheme planned out for him to succeed in, but is he going to put in the effort to be successful? That's the number one question for Kenny Golladay. It's about effort. Character concerns, I guess you can call them. We didn't really have those when he was with the Detroit Lions, and we didn't have any questions about that stuff when he came to New York. But now that he's been here for a year, maybe Jason Garrett took all of the fun out of football for him. Maybe he really ruined the sport for him. I sure hope not. I mean, if I was getting paid $18 million on average every year, I could tell you I don't think I'd ever fall out of love with football. But I guess to each their own. It happens to everybody in special ways. But for Kenny Golladay, man, he's got to find that love for it, and he's got to work hard, play hard, and put in the effort to be a successful wide receiver in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think he can, man. Like, this is not a player that's coming off a significant injury. He's not a player that is incapable. We know what his strengths are. The problem is the Giants have not played to a lot of their players' strengths in the past couple of years, right? Like, that's the reality of the situation. They have not used Saquon Barkley right. They have not used anybody really the right way. So, now we're seeing a better offensive scheme, or at least we hope to see. We know that they're trying to build around players' strengths. We know they're trying to attack these positives. The question is, can Daniel Jones and the offensive line make it happen for Kenny Golladay? Like, that's just the reality. He's not Devontae Adams. He's not Tyreek Hill. He's not an elite route runner. That's not what he's good at. He is an elite possession receiver, which means you have to get him into 1v1 coverage, and you have to allow him to use his frame. You have to get him on these slants where he can extend his frame and get out in front of the football. There are ways, like, you have to attack his strengths. If you don't do that, he's going to be useless. Throwing him freaking fade routes in the red zone every goddamn red zone opportunity is not how you use Kenny Golladay, because everybody knows it's coming. Back shoulder throw this man. Use unique and creative ways to get him open and 1v1 coverage. Like for goodness sakes, like, if the fans are able to predict what's happening on the football field as it's unfolding, you probably know the scheme is a piece of absolute shit. And I think that's been the case with the Giants the last couple of years. I don't think that's going to happen this season. I think we're going to see a lot more 1v1 coverage for Kenny Golladay because Kadarius, Saquon, Juan, they're going to draw a lot of attention. So I think Kenny's going to have a lot more opportunity. But I do think that he probably won't be the focal point of this offense. And I think that that's probably a given by most perspectives. I think Wandale will have more reps than him, or at least more targets. I think Kadarius will have more targets as long as he's healthy. Saquon will have more receiving targets than him. He's going to be a situational player that I believe gets targeted in specific scenarios. Like, they're gonna design things to get him involved, but he's not going to be your screen pass catcher that takes it 20 yards after the catch. Like, that's not his style. So I am curious to hear perspectives below, though, my friends, about Kenny Golladay, what you think he can accomplish, how you think he can accomplish it, what it ultimately boils down to. But appreciate all the love. We have another preseason game against the Bengals coming up, and the Bengals won't be utilizing their starters. So, another opportunity for the Giants to hopefully, put the weight on, with some of their starters, and Daniel Jones gets some more reps. Hopefully everyone stays healthy here. We'll give you guys some updates when they unfold. And Brian Dable gives us some information about who will be playing and whatnot this upcoming week. But we're getting closer. So guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Love to hear your perspectives below as always. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Giants episode.
TVSO.